Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Genesis, the 22nd chapter. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham. And he said, Behold, here I am. And he said, and the tempt here, meaning the Lord wanted to test him. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son, Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell thee, or I will tell thee of. Now, what's interesting here, right, is you don't see Abraham trying to, well, at least based on what was written here, trying to argue with the Lord or, Lord, but what do you mean? You just gave me, hold on. I'm confused. First you say when I didn't have a child that my seed was going to be great. And then you gave me Ishmael. You said, no, it wasn't going to be him. It would come from Sarah. Sarah was barren. She was very old. And then you finally gave me a son from her who's going to be the heir as you have already promised me. And now you're telling me to offer him to you? What's going on? What gives? He didn't say that, right? He just obeyed the Lord because Abraham had faith. Okay, he had faith that, well, the Lord is a man of his word. He gave me a son who he said is going to be heir, and yet he wants me to sacrifice the son. So there must be a reason. And if I do sacrifice him, maybe then the Lord can raise him up again, right? Or the Lord can give me another one. Whatever the case is, the Lord said that he's going to make my seed great through through Sarah. That's what he's going to do. And you can imagine how difficult this is. But the love and fear that Abraham had for the Lord superseded that. This is why the Lord said in the New Testament, if you come to serve him and you don't hate your mother or father, which doesn't mean to hate like you just hate them, but it means to love them less, meaning you got to love the Lord above all. And Abraham did that. And he showed that here. Because he was about to do this without hesitation. Well, we're about to find out. And Abraham rose up early in the morning and saddled his ass and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son and clave the wood for the burnt offering. Cleaving the wood is to, when you cleave something, you cut it. So what he was doing was he basically chopped up wood that he would use for the fire, for the offering. And rose up and went on to the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place afar off. So this was a ways journey. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I and the lad will go yonder and worship and come again to you. So you can tell by this that nobody knew what Abraham was going to do. And obviously, how could people know? They would be like, oh, this guy's crazy. You know, matter of fact, Sarah would have, shit. What do you think Sarah would have done if she actually knew that this is what Abraham was going to go do? I haven't already seen a glimpse of her nature. What do you think she would have actually done? You think she would have let him? And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. So he had Isaac carry the wood, and he took the fire. Now this fire could have been like a fire pot, you know, or torch or something to start a fire. But either way, it was to get the job done because they needed fire. And Isaac spake unto Abraham his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? So we have all the other stuff, but where's the actual offering itself? It's like it's like going to the market and you buy, you know, a frying pan, right? You buy oil, you buy, you know, a spatula, you buy salt, you buy all these things and there's no meat. there's nothing, and you're wondering, well, okay, we bought all the stuff that we would need, but the car is missing the engine. And Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went, both of them together. And this is very spiritual here, right? What's going on? This temptation of Abraham is actually very symbolic of what we will see, a similitude really of what we end up seeing in the New Testament. And they came to the place where God had told him of, and Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. So he set up the altar, he laid the wood, and bound Isaac his son. So he tied him up and laid him upon the altar, upon the wood. Now, it doesn't say here whether, it doesn't give us details as to how this went, right? We don't know if at this point Isaac was just calm, like, all right, if I gotta be a sacrifice, I gotta be a sacrifice. Or if he was like crying, or if he was confused, or because he's still a boy, right? But long story short, we know that Isaac is tied up on the altar, and Abraham is about to perform the sacrifice. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. So he got the knife, and he's about to. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham, hold up now, slow down, buddy. And he said, here am I. So you can see here, right, by the double calling of his name, it can give you a bit of insight into the visual here. It doesn't look like Abraham was like being shaky about this. So the Lord had to make sure he heard him. He had to get his attention quick. He said, before this temptation goes too far left, let me stop him right now. So he calls him, Abraham, whoa, hold on. Like that kind of urgency. And Abraham responds, and he said, lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. So nope, don't actually slay him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And you can imagine, right? Like, for those that actually have children, can you imagine how much actual pain that Abraham would have been in, in doing this? But he didn't let that, because that's of the flesh, right? He didn't let that mess him up, right? He just followed the spirit, right? And just stayed locked into the mindset that if this is what my God requires, then this is what I have to do. To the point where the Most High had to stop him and be like, yo, hold on. All right, I got you. I know. I know how far you're willing to go for me. Now, it's easier read than done. Because how many people would actually be able to do this if you were there in Abraham's stead at that point? And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And the reason that I said this was all spiritual is because, through the spirit, right, we believe that Isaac, right, the spirit in Isaac was also that in Yahushua. And I believe Paul mentions, something similar on that in Hebrews. That's why when you go all the way up to the top, there's the reference over here, right? I'll just read it real quick. Hebrews 11:17, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. See, so the story of Abraham and Isaac was really symbolic for that of Yahushua coming on the scene, because here the Lord didn't have Abraham actually sacrifice his only begotten son, but in the time of the New Testament, the Lord, Abraham being the father, like the father, and then Isaac being his only begotten son, in the time of the New Testament, the Lord actually did sacrifice his son, his only begotten son, as an offering, as a lamb, which is interesting because that's what Isaac mentioned, right? He said, where's the lamb? And then Abraham said, what? The Most High will provide a lamb for himself. And that's what he ended up doing later on when the Messiah actually came on the scene. So going back to Genesis 22 and where are we at? Yeah, 20 and 13. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and more than likely he probably told him, look, don't say anything to your mom about this. Because even if it's after the fact, she gonna raise hell. You did what? Whoa. She gonna grab Isaac, pull him to her. You stay away from this man. I don't know who he is anymore. You try to do what to my baby? No. And she probably call one of the servants to take Isaac to another part, and she gonna go give Abraham a ear or two earfuls. Because that's the thing about women, they're ruled by their emotions, and they would listen to that over the Lord. That's why the Lord deals with the men first and foremost. So she would say, I don't care who told you what. You do not ever try to harm my baby. And Abraham lifted up his eyes. Hey, sometimes you gotta visualize it, man. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by the horns. So when he turned, it was like a ram whose horns are stuck in like this little bush or little branches. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place. Now it says here Jehovah Jireh, but we know that in the Hebrew, the name of the Most High is Yahweh, right? Not Jehovah, really Yahweh Jireh. As it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. Now this makes more sense in another translation, but it's like as it says in the NLT here, Abraham named the place Yahweh Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. To this day, people still use that name as a proverb. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. So just as the Lord provided for Abraham, it's like a saying, that it will be provided. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. And going back to the situation with this here. So I guess maybe people did find out. Verse 15, and the angel of the Lord Yahweh called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and said, by myself have I sworn, saith the Lord Yahweh, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven. Because you were willing to give up the only begotten one that you had. And so in return, I'm gonna give you more than one. I'm gonna give you an abundance. And as the sand which is upon the seashore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. But to possess the gate of your enemies is another way of saying you conquer them, because the gate is like the entrance to the city. So when you possess that of your enemies, that means you've been able to overcome them. And as it says, they are now subject unto you. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. See, and so who was thy seed? Starting with Isaac and then Jacob, of which come the 12 tribes. All right, and it is now they're going to be blessed first and foremost, but it is through them that really everybody else, the entire planet, is going to be blessed. As the scriptures or the proverb goes, when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn, and when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. So Abraham returned unto his young men, and they rose up and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. And it came to pass after these things that it was told Abraham, saying, behold, Milcah, she hath also borne children unto thy brother Nahor. Remember that his relatives were over there in Padan Aram, where he had moved on all the way to come to the land of Canaan. Huz, his firstborn, and Buz, his brother, and Kemuel, the father of Aram, and Kesed, and Hazo, and Pildash, and Jidlap, and Bethuel, And Bethuel begat Rebekah. These 8 Milcah did bear to Nahor, Abraham's brother. And his concubine, whose name was Reumah, she bare also Tebah and Gaham and Thahash and Maacah. And that brings us to the end of the book of Genesis, the 22nd chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodesh. Until next time, Shalom.